What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to TTB Ravens Media. This is, of course, the Truzz the Bank podcast. We're going to try and do a better job getting more podcast episodes out. That's my bad, everyone. I apologize. But we have some good topics that we're going to be going over today. If you're watching this on YouTube and you're seeing this first segment, go check out the other segments that will be posted on the next couple of days. And then if you want to just watch them all, listen to them all right now, check out Spotify. They have video podcast formats, so you can just watch the whole thing on Spotify. Or if you want to listen on Apple Podcasts, you can feel free to do that as well. The overall topics we're going to be talking about, young secondary, Ravens cap space, what to do with the remaining money, and then finally an interesting topic of, is this a make or break year for the Ravens? But Joshua, before we get into any of this, how are you feeling about the Ravens right now?
Oh man, you know what? I feel pretty confident about this Ravens roster that they worked on putting together, man. You know, and also, I know a lot of people talk about, how things will be with and without Lamar, but we got Lamar for another 5 years. So knowing that he's in the facility, he's in Baltimore doing OTAs, getting the guys acclimated, and getting acclimated with the offensive coordinator and Todd Monken. You're hearing good things from T. Martin, as his QB coach now officially. So I mean, it's a lot of good things to take away from it. It's just when it gets to OTAs, it get kind of slow. Don't get a lot of news because everybody's working, everybody's grinding. But I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good.
Yeah, and in terms of players that are grinding, I think the biggest thing to pay attention to is always the young guys and seeing how they're going to fit in. And in this first segment, we're going to be talking about this. Question came from Jalen Evans on the YouTube community section, and he basically talked about how are the Ravens going to be utilizing their young defensive backs, their young secondary. So we've got a few guys that we're going to bring up outside of the obvious ones, like Kyle Hamilton. He's going to be our starting safety. There's not much to really discuss about that. Right, but we got Pepe Williams, Jalen Arbor-Davis, Kyu Blu Kelly. We've got some undrafted free agents as well. We just signed Rock Ya-Sin. Obviously, we know Marlon's going to be out there. But Joshua, when you hear those names, what one is kind of standing out to you the most as going to play right away or going to be contributing the most out of those younger cornerbacks?
Oh man, and you know what? I know you're a Stanford fan. I know you give Kyu Blu Kelly a lot of praise. I mean, he done his dang on thing, especially for someone to start as a true freshman. Even with my undrafted free agent, straight out of Baltimore, St. Francis Academy guy, with Jordan Swan picking off Snoop in practice. But I gotta go with Pepe Williams, man. That's been my dog ever since day one. Ever since he stepped on the field, he's been a sponge when it comes to soaking up information and learning. But he made an immediate impact. Whether it was try to be on special teams, even playing the nickel. But one thing about him that I feel like that we miss in that secondary, even though Marlon does it, he is a striker. He doesn't fear no one, no matter how tall they are, no matter how fast they are. He's going to use his technique to the best of his ability. He's going to play with a level of physicality that you missed in our secondary. So I love seeing him getting a lot of PT. I do feel like he can possibly beat out of Brandon Stevens, on the field, because let's be honest, they put Brandon Stevens out there on the field, and they haven't given him one position to truly work on so he can hone his skills and actually develop those skills. And, Pepe Williams, to me, just got a lot of promise, man. I feel like he can contribute. We've seen what he can do when he's on the field, and I feel like he's going to be able to contribute to this defense for this upcoming season as well.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I think when they were drafted, Jalen Arbor-Davis and Pepe Williams, the thought was that Jalen Arbor-Davis was a project player. And I think a lot of people hear Alabama, and the whole thought behind Alabama is step in right away, they can play.
Right.
That wasn't Jalen Arbor-Davis. He was not a dominant cornerback at Alabama. He's a late round pick that, has some traits, but he's going to need to develop. And we saw that. We saw him get completely burned in multiple games. And there was a reason that we were watching it. And again, when I have the expectation of a player being a project, I don't get that upset when they get burned. Why? Because it's the expectation. They're not supposed to be there to dominate. That's why I'm not as mad as so many other Ravens fans about Adolphe Away. It was like he's a project. So when he's not dominating or whatever, I'm not too upset about it because that wasn't the expectation. But Pepe Williams, when he was drafted, I was like, hey, this guy may be able to play pretty early. And he came in, and I felt like he did a decent job for, a day 3 rookie cornerback. He wasn't Tariq Woolen out there, but he did a decent job locking players up, going after tackles, trying to get interceptions, and trying to make those big plays. And I feel like, like you brought up, he played a little bit in the nickel, and I think we could absolutely see him out there as a nickel cornerback for the Ravens this year, in a lot of different situations. I think the Ravens are going to utilize their cornerbacks in a matchup type situation. I don't think they'll have a designated slot because their number one corner can play the slot. And I think they're going to have Marlon track the number one wide receiver. So if the Ravens go up against, a team like the Raiders, where Davante Adams sometimes plays out of the slot, and you want your best guy on Davante Adams. So exactly. I think it's going to be different than in recent years where I was like, hey, Marlon and Marcus, you guys are just on the outside. Now it's going to be, okay, Marlon, you're going to track the best player on the field basically at all times. And that's going to allow Pepe Williams, when Marlon's on the outside, to play on the inside. And maybe when Marlon steps to the inside, that's when we start to see some Brandon Stevens. But I think Pepe Williams is going to get a lot of playing time. And I think he's going to show that he is a not a Tavon Young, but somebody that can attack the ball as well as attack the tackle at the same time. Like, he's going to go for the picks, but he's also not going to shy away from tackling, because a guy like Marcus Peters, he's going for the picks, not the tackle.
Right.
Pepe goes for both. And that's something that I really like about him. But at the same time, I think we will see some Kyu Blu Kelly. I'm going to say this right now. I think Kyu Blu Kelly on day one is going to be higher on the depth chart than Jalen Armour-Davis.
I can't argue with that. I mean, for the simple fact that I don't know if it was actually him getting burnt by Keaton Mitchell. If it was, it happens. Everybody has their days. But Kyu Blu Kelly has a lot of more problems than Jalen Armour-Davis. Excuse me. So I definitely can see that. I can see that happening. I mean, the guy got promised. He reminds me of a Richard Sherman, not the speediest, but he's smart, intelligent, got the length. He plays physical. He's if he can get the interception, he gets the interception. But 9 times out of 10, he's gonna get those pass breakups, and we need those type of guys. So by all means, I feel like with this defense and how the secondary is going to come together, and you got the leaders in Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Williams. I don't know how Rock Ya-Sin is going to step into a leadership role, but you could possibly see him as doing that as well. So these young guys have some guys they can look up to and see by example, and hopefully take some skills away and get better.
Yeah, I think, again, Jalen Armour-Davis is seen as a developmental player. He's seen as somebody that the Ravens are going to have to work with. But at the same time, that's okay, because we do have other players that we can slide in. The problem of developmental players comes when nobody can play. And all of a sudden you're being forced to play somebody that necessarily isn't very good, and they get burned. And that happened last year when we didn't have somebody outside of Marlon that we felt we could play at all times after the loss of Kyle Fuller and Marlon Humphrey being kind of in and out, and really just not being the player that he was a couple of years ago. Now we got Kyu, we have Pepe, we have Rock Ya-Sin as players that can play. And then, down the line, maybe we have Jalen Armour-Davis starting to take over, but he was a depth player and he was a character player that we drafted. And again, not everybody has to be a dominant number one lockdown corner to be a great draft pick. I still think Chris Moore was a good draft pick by the Baltimore Ravens. Did Chris Moore play good quarterback either? Wide receiver? Man, I could not for some reason say that. No, he wasn't a great wide receiver, but he's a great special teams player, and that made it worth it. Justice Hill, same thing, 4th round pick out of Oklahoma State. Is he a great running back for the Ravens? No, but he's a special teamer, and he plays very well at special teams, and he's worth having on the roster. If a player is worth having on a roster and is a benefit to your organization, and he is a day 3 draft pick, that is a very solid pick. Because a lot of day 3 picks don't do anything.
This facts.
That's when it's all of a sudden, oh man, that was a bad pick. I think Jalen Arbor Davis can end up being a good pick. I think he's going to play special teams, but I think right now I'm expecting Pepe Williams to get the bulk. Kyu Blu Kelly every once in a while to step on the field. And then obviously Marlon and Rocky Sin kind of out there most of the time. And also we could see Mullen a little bit.
I forgot about him.
And some Brandon Stevens, but we're going to see the young guys out there, but not in a role where it's like fully relying on them to be a lockdown player. They're going to be cornerback 3 or 4 on the field.
For sure. I mean, at the end of the day, I love the fact that we are going young. I do feel like, the Ravens are realizing that, hey, it is good to have veterans at the end of the day, but still, in sports, it still is a young man and woman's game. And sometimes you gotta, keep on refreshing, the toolage with, young talent and keep on while they are young, some project players you can develop into be stars, and some, that you feel like are project development players. Sometimes they are busts. So, the Ravens have I would say, what is it, like 75% rate of taking project players and making them, decent starters, and a 25% rate of project players that just don't work out. Or maybe Ravens fans, y'all let us know in the chat or in comments, how y'all feel about that. Maybe it's higher or maybe on the lower end, but it's definitely a good thing to see how the scouting team is going about finding talent, seeing who could be brought in. And like I said, hopefully these young men can blossom and be great contributors to this team.
Absolutely. And